The first thing I did after becoming a vampire was run straight into the blazing sunlight to bask in its glory. All my fellow vampires thought I had lost my mind completely, because as everyone knows, vampires are supposed to fear sunlight above all else. What they didn't know, though, was that my first talent after becoming a vampire was actually something called solar absorption. I could grow stronger just by constantly soaking up sunlight like a living solar panel. Originally, I was just an ordinary high school student named Kazuki Yamamoto, but everything changed when I was suddenly diagnosed with a rare blood disease and given only 6 months to live. To keep breathing, I had to sell the small apartment my parents left me and use every penny to buy third-generation vampire blood on the black market. When I injected that crimson liquid into my veins, I only felt my consciousness growing faint and distant. Then my heart slowly stopped beating its familiar rhythm. When I woke up again 3 days later, I quickly pressed my hand against my chest and waited. After a full minute passed without feeling a single heartbeat, a smile spread across my face from ear to ear. My heart had completely stopped beating, which meant my transformation into a vampire was 100% successful. It turned out that hundreds of years ago, a mysterious crimson fruit descended from the heavens above. Any creature that consumed it would gain unparalleled supernatural powers beyond imagination. The ancestor of the vampire clan had turned humans into vampires precisely by eating this forbidden fruit that fell from the sky. A newly transformed vampire gains an initial talent right from the start. A vampire's heart beats only once per year under normal circumstances. After 10 heartbeats, they gain access to a minor talent. After 100 heartbeats, they unlock a major talent that can reshape their entire existence. When a vampire has sufficient nourishment and energy, their heart can even beat once every 6 months instead of yearly. I carefully recalled all the information I had collected during my research phase and felt the dramatic changes flowing through my body. Not only had my blood disease been completely cured, but I felt stronger and more alive than ever before. Immediately after examining myself, a wave of intense hunger hit me like a freight train. So I climbed out of bed and habitually reached for the light switch on the wall. Then I froze completely in place with shock. My body was actually absorbing the artificial light from the ceiling fixture. How was this even remotely possible? Could my first talent really be something as incredible as solar absorption? I looked up at the incandescent bulb above me, and the doubt on my face gradually transformed into pure ecstasy and excitement. I immediately rushed to the window and violently pulled open the heavy curtains I had installed. The brilliant morning sun poured through the glass and bathed my entire body in golden warmth. Right after that magical moment, my gnawing hunger quickly disappeared without a trace. I had actually become what other vampires would consider a complete outcast among their kind. I was now a light collector, the rarest type of vampire in existence. The next day, I sprawled out on my apartment balcony enjoying the warm sunshine and dialed my homeroom teacher's phone number. Earlier that month, I had taken an extended leave of absence under the pretense of dealing with family inheritance matters, and I was originally planning to drop out of school altogether. But after discovering just how incredibly powerful a light collector vampire could become, I realized that maintaining my student identity was actually the perfect cover story. After all, I was technically an illegally transformed vampire who had bypassed all official channels. If the vampire authorities ever discovered my existence, they would definitely hunt me down without mercy and eliminate me as a threat. After quickly explaining my situation to my confused homeroom teacher, I had just hung up the phone when something extraordinary happened. I suddenly felt my heart beat once with tremendous force. I immediately pressed both hands against my chest, my eyes filled with complete disbelief and wonder. Wasn't my heart supposed to beat only once per year according to vampire biology? I had only been lounging in direct sunlight for half a day, and it had already beaten once with incredible power. I gasped in amazement and realization. It seemed the Light Eater ability was far more powerful than I had initially thought possible. If my heart could beat once or twice every single day instead of yearly, I could potentially gain a minor talent in just 5 to 10 days. I could definitely obtain a major talent within 100 days of consistent effort. Although the ancestor of the vampire clan had lived for hundreds of years and accumulated immense power, as long as I kept a low profile and developed my abilities steadily for 10 years, my strength would definitely surpass even that ancient patriarch. The entire country would be forever changed by my presence. After coming to this earth-shattering realization, I made a firm decision to keep an extremely low profile from that moment forward. I would blend in with human society while secretly growing stronger each day. On Monday morning, I arrived at my classroom right on schedule. My best friends Tanaka and Sato immediately surrounded me with excited expressions. They said enthusiastically that I looked completely different after my leave of absence. They asked if I had been secretly working out behind their backs, because my physique seemed noticeably better than before. I explained that my family issues had been resolved, so I decided to return to school early. Then, I quickly pointed across the street to change the subject entirely. I asked them what was happening over there with all the increased security. Across from our Sakura High School stood the prestigious Supernatural Academy, where students with various magical abilities receive specialized education. It seemed like the number of security guards at the Supernatural Academy had doubled overnight, and there were also mysterious men in black suits patrolling the perimeter. Tanaka explained that those were elite bodyguards brought in for extra protection. He had heard through the rumor mill that the vampire clan's little princess had been attacked by unknown assailants recently. I stared at the heavily fortified Supernatural Academy building, and a disturbing thought suddenly crossed my mind. Could the vampire blood I had injected into my system have been stolen directly from her? There were exactly 6 vampire clan students enrolled at the Supernatural Academy in total. Among them, the one with the highest social status and political importance was definitely the vampire clan's little princess, whose name was Akira Bloodmoon. She was what vampires called a second-generation hybrid, meaning she was born from the union between a pure vampire and a human. Since her father held an extremely high position within the vampire clan's political hierarchy, she had earned the unofficial title of Little Princess of the Vampire Clan throughout our entire city. Her status was basically untouchable. As we walked toward our school building, I casually asked Sato about the vampire princess's special abilities. Sato scratched his head thoughtfully for a moment, then shook it with uncertainty. He said he had forgotten the specific details, but he thought someone in our class had mentioned it before. It was supposedly something very rare and unusual. A girl walking just ahead of us suddenly turned around with bright eyes. She said she knew exactly what the vampire clan's little princess could do. Her special talent was called Daywalker, which allowed her to function normally in direct sunlight. That ability actually made her quite controversial within traditional vampire society, because most vampires considered it an abomination. She was the only vampire in recorded history who could walk freely under the blazing sun without any negative consequences whatsoever. When I heard this crucial information, my heart skipped several beats in rapid succession. I became absolutely certain that the blood I had purchased and injected definitely came from Princess Akira Bloodmoon herself. But if that theory was correct, then maintaining my simple student identity might no longer provide adequate protection from discovery. I needed to be much more careful about my activities and movements going forward. Late that same night, in the basement of an elegant mansion located in the wealthy district of our city, more than a dozen men sat tied up with thick ropes. Heavy blindfolds covered their eyes completely. A young man with delicate facial features and long, flowing hair stepped forward. He wore an expensive black tuxedo that looked perfectly tailored to his slim frame. The killing intent in his melodious voice grew stronger and more menacing with each word he spoke. He said they claimed to be capable of acquiring anything for the right price, so he wondered if they could somehow purchase their own worthless lives. If he didn't desperately need to interrogate them about where Princess Akira's stolen blood had ended up, he would have already chopped them into tiny pieces and fed them to his hungry dogs. As Princess Akira's appointed guardian and protector within our city, he bore tremendous responsibility for this catastrophic security failure. Princess Akira possessed the extremely rare Daywalker talent, which meant normal vampire bodyguards couldn't accompany her during daylight hours when she was most vulnerable. He could only assign specially trained human security personnel to follow and protect her when she ventured outside during the day. When Princess Akira had been attacked while shopping at the downtown mall during broad daylight, there was absolutely nothing he could have done to prevent it. The human guards were simply outmatched by professional criminals. After Princess Akira suffered this humiliating incident, he immediately mobilized every single vampire clan resource available within the city limits. He had finally managed to intercept this group of thieves before they could flee to another prefecture entirely. He really hadn't expected that all the attackers would turn out to be completely ordinary humans without any supernatural abilities whatsoever. The implications of this discovery were deeply troubling for multiple reasons. The elegant vampire walked up to the youngest man among the captives and gently patted his trembling cheek. His voice was deceptively calm as he asked who they had sold the stolen blood to after the successful heist. This particular young man appeared to be the leader of their criminal organization based on his body language. The leader answered truthfully, through chattering teeth, that the buyer had been wearing a mask during their transaction. He explained that there were strict professional rules in their line of illegal work. Prying into customers' personal backgrounds or identities was completely forbidden and could result in severe punishment. That was absolutely all the information he possessed about the mysterious purchaser. The vampire sneered coldly at this pathetic excuse and suddenly plunged his pale hand directly into the neck of the man sitting beside the leader. The victim immediately began convulsing violently and screaming in absolute agony. The vampire's voice remained eerily calm as he explained that the captives had their professional rules, but he definitely had his own methods for extracting information. He wanted to see whose rules would prove more powerful in the end. After that ominous statement, bone-chilling screams echoed from the basement at regular intervals throughout the night. Eventually, the underground chamber fell completely silent once again. The vampire emerged from the basement looking perfectly composed and walked over to his faithful assistant. His voice was businesslike as he gave new orders. He told his subordinate to take several investigation teams and search for the thief who had acquired Princess Akira's precious blood. The target should be approximately the same age as Princess Akira herself, and his family background should indicate access to substantial financial resources. During recent weeks, this person may have withdrawn more than 25 million yen from various bank accounts. The vampire was determined to track down this individual no matter what obstacles appeared. His assistant bowed respectfully and began to speak, but before he could finish his first sentence, the vampire interrupted him sharply. The assistant was instructed to bring the target back alive and completely unharmed so that Princess Akira could deal with him personally. The Duke had specifically ordered that it was finally time for the young princess to witness real bloodshed firsthand. Back at Sakura High School, I sat comfortably by the large classroom window, basking in the warm afternoon sunlight while reading an entertaining novel. These days, I spent my time quietly absorbing solar energy during school hours and practicing various combat techniques at home during the evening. My physical strength was increasing dramatically with each passing day. The power behind my punch had already exceeded 1 full ton of force per strike. I honestly wasn't sure if this level of strength was considered impressive or mediocre among vampire standards. Today marked exactly the moment when my heart had reached 10 total beats since my transformation. I wondered with growing anticipation what kind of minor talent I would awaken next. I enjoyed the sensation of sunlight warming my skin while feeling genuinely excited about my future development. Suddenly, my heart beat violently once with tremendous force. It felt like hearing thunder crash directly inside my consciousness. Some mysterious power began condensing through my bloodline and flowing through my soul. In that incredible instant, I learned exactly what my new minor talent was called. The ability was named Silver Immunity. Besides fearing direct sunlight, vampires also had a legendary weakness to pure silver metal. Although silver wasn't quite as lethal as sunlight exposure, it could severely inhibit a vampire's natural healing abilities and cause excruciating pain. After school ended for the day, I went straight home and immediately retrieved the silver ring I had used previously to test my vampire blood. According to vampire lore, when any vampire touches silver objects, their skin should experience an intense burning sensation similar to touching red-hot metal. Now, as I held the silver ring casually in my palm, I felt absolutely no discomfort or pain whatsoever. However, silver immunity's primary function wasn't simply being immune to silver's traditional restraining effects. The talent actually allowed me to consume silver metal and convert all the blood flowing through my body into something called silver blood. This transformation would enhance my physical capabilities even further than before. At the same time, I could manipulate silver blood to form flexible whips or razor-thin threads that could slice through almost any material. Obviously, this talent was far beyond what should be considered a simple minor ability. It was probably even more powerful than some major talents that other vampires spent centuries trying to develop. I opened my mouth and felt my fangs slowly extend to their full length. I placed the silver ring carefully on my sharp canine teeth and instinctively began to suck on the metal. The sensation was surprisingly similar to consuming thick jelly or pudding. The silver completely dissolved and fused with my bloodstream shortly after entering my system. I took a few moments to adjust to the strange new feeling coursing through my veins, then felt an even stronger craving for additional silver metal. Unfortunately, it would be extremely difficult to purchase large quantities of silver at reasonable prices. The money I had remaining from selling my apartment couldn't cover the expense of buying significant amounts. The main problem was that vampire clans had been aggressively buying up silver supplies worldwide, driving market prices higher than gold itself. I spent the entire night thinking desperately, but couldn't come up with any practical solution for obtaining more silver affordably. Early the next morning, I was relaxing on my balcony, enjoying the sunrise as usual, when a terrible stench suddenly wafted through the air. The smell was absolutely revolting, like dead rats decomposing in summer heat. I got up from my comfortable chair and began sniffing around the balcony area trying to locate the source. The horrible stench appeared for several seconds, then disappeared completely without explanation. I realized that the silver blood now flowing through my nasal passages had dramatically enhanced my sense of smell beyond normal human limits. I deliberately directed more silver blood to concentrate in my nose, and sure enough, the disgusting odor returned immediately. I decided to follow the scent trail downstairs to investigate further. A family of 3 lived in the apartment directly below mine. Could it be possible that the entire family had died inside their home? I muttered this disturbing thought to myself while holding my nose against the overwhelming stench. I generally preferred not to meddle in other people's personal business, so I quickly tried to dismiss these concerns from my mind. Besides, it was almost time for me to leave for school anyway. Just as I was walking down the stairwell, I happened to encounter the teenage daughter from that family leaving with her school bag. A sudden thought crossed my mind, so I directed my silver blood to gather in my nasal area once again. Instantly, that same revolting stench seemed to emanate directly from her body. I quickly moved the silver blood from my nose to my right eye instead. The terrible smell disappeared, but then something far worse became visible through my enhanced vision. I could see countless tiny red worms writhing and squirming just beneath her skin. The sight triggered my trypophobia so severely that I hurried down the remaining stairs and walked quickly toward school. I frowned deeply during the entire way, remembered Shibuya tragedy that had occurred exactly 1 year ago. All the teachers and students at a middle school in that district had been unknowingly parasitized by a mysterious type of organism. Because of that horrific incident, our city had organized a universal medical examination program, and that's when my rare blood disease had first been diagnosed. I never imagined those same parasites from Shibuya would have quietly infiltrated our city as well. This was definitely going to become a major problem that could affect thousands of innocent people. I wondered if I should report my discovery to the authorities immediately. But if I did make an official report, there would definitely be a second universal medical examination conducted throughout the city. My identity as an unregistered vampire would almost certainly be exposed during such comprehensive testing. What was I supposed to do in this impossible situation? I asked myself as I continued walking toward school. Zhang approached me with his usual cheerful expression, completely unaware of the internal crisis I was facing. He started chatting about some online forum he had discovered the night before, but I could barely focus on his words. My enhanced senses were picking up more disturbing information with every step I took. When I discreetly directed silver blood to my eyes while scanning the students around us, I discovered that roughly 30% of them were already infected with the same red parasites. The situation in our city was actually much worse than what had happened in Shibuya 1 year ago. Discovery and exposure seemed inevitable at this point. Once the parasite outbreak became public knowledge, it would only be a matter of time before I got caught up in the resulting chaos and investigation. I had to do something proactive to protect myself, but every option seemed to lead toward the same dangerous outcome. I returned to my classroom and immediately started researching everything I could find about these organisms online. The parasites were officially classified as crimson worms, and their transmission methods remained largely unknown to medical science. If the host they parasitized happened to be human, the crimson worm would gradually absorb human intelligence and memories, becoming extremely cunning and difficult to detect or eliminate. This represented the parasite's ultimate evolutionary form, which researchers had designated as the adult stage. Several adult-form crimson worms had appeared during the Shibuya tragedy, and it had required the sacrifice of multiple special operations officers and dozens of heavily armed police units to eliminate them completely. Even after that massive coordinated effort, many people had still gone missing without a trace. These missing individuals were most likely additional adult-form crimson worms that had successfully escaped the containment zone. After reading through all available information about crimson worms, a sudden commotion erupted from outside our classroom. Zhang burst through the door with eyes shining with excitement. He announced breathlessly that the vampire clan's little princess had just transferred to our ordinary school. I immediately frowned with concern and asked why she would possibly want to attend our regular academic institution. The Supernatural Academy taught specialized knowledge about the supernatural world that was completely different from standard human education curriculum. Could it be that my illegal transformation had somehow been discovered, and Princess Akira had come here specifically to eliminate me as a threat? This terrifying thought sent chills down my spine as I considered all the horrible possibilities. Zhang shrugged and admitted he had no idea about her motivations, but he insisted she was definitely the most beautiful girl he had ever seen in his entire life. At that moment, our class representative Chen looked around nervously before speaking in a hushed whisper. She explained that this situation actually stemmed from the princess being attacked by ordinary humans several days ago. Most people probably wouldn't believe such an embarrassing story, but it was completely true according to her sources. When this humiliating news had reached her classmates at the Supernatural Academy, Princess Akira had faced severe social ostracism and bullying. Zhang nodded with understanding after hearing this explanation. If he possessed supernatural powers, but still got beaten up by a group of normal humans, he would definitely feel too ashamed to show his face among his peers. The students at Supernatural Academy were notoriously arrogant and looked down on ordinary humans as inferior beings. In their twisted perspective, Princess Akira losing to regular humans was essentially a complete disgrace to the entire supernatural community. Even though the vampire clan wielded tremendous political power, they weren't the only dominant supernatural faction in existence. Elves, witches, cultivators, martial artists, and dozens of other supernatural groups all possessed enough strength to rival the vampire clan's influence. In the end, Princess Akira had been forced to transfer schools to escape the constant harassment and social isolation. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, our homeroom teacher entered the classroom, followed by an extraordinarily beautiful girl. She had long golden hair that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, and her entire presence radiated an aura of cold elegance that made everyone fall silent. At that moment, time and space seemed to freeze completely as every student stared in absolute wonder. The dream girl that every boy in our class had been fantasizing about suddenly transformed into this single person standing before us. Even the girls were completely captivated by Princess Akira's stunning appearance and graceful movements. As a supernatural creature, her physical beauty exceeded anything possible for normal humans. Our teacher coughed awkwardly to break the spell that had fallen over the entire classroom. She announced that starting today, student Akira would be studying alongside all of us as a regular member of our academic community. Princess Akira's piercing gaze swept across every student in the classroom, taking careful mental notes of each face. Finally, her eyes lingered on me with particular intensity, and I felt a subtle but unmistakable sense of recognition pass between us. 25 million yen was such an enormous sum of money that when combined with factors like age, gender, and connection to vampire clan business, their investigation teams only needed to use basic elimination techniques to identify me quickly. Originally, according to their standard operational procedures, her bodyguard should have led armed teams to capture me immediately, and then Princess Akira would have executed me personally as punishment. But after learning about my specific background and circumstances, Princess Akira's father had decided to change tactics completely. After all, I had only recently been transformed into a vampire and was approximately the same age as his daughter. I would definitely serve as an excellent training target for developing her combat skills and killer instincts. If Princess Akira could successfully hunt me down through her own efforts, she would surely grow tremendously from the challenging experience. After introducing herself with practiced politeness, Princess Akira was assigned to sit at a desk that was perfectly level with mine in the classroom seating arrangement. Her first supernatural talent was the controversial Daywalker ability, while her second talent was something called blood flame manipulation. Although she desperately wanted to burn me alive right there in the classroom, she managed to restrain her violent impulses through sheer willpower. According to her carefully planned strategy, since I possessed the same Daywalker talent as herself, I probably had developed high resistance to both light and fire-based attacks. She wasn't completely confident that she could eliminate me with a single decisive strike in front of all these witnesses. So, she had prepared a special secret weapon for this assassination mission. The weapon was an ancient silver dagger that had been blessed by vampire elders centuries ago. Now all she needed to do was blend in naturally with the other students to lower my guard and suspicion. When I finally relaxed and stopped paying attention to potential threats, she would strike like lightning and plunge that dagger directly into my heart for an instant kill. I waited patiently until the bell rang, signaling the end of our current class period, then walked out of the classroom silently. I stood by the metal railing in the hallway corridor, looking out at the city landscape below. That familiar, revolting stench flashed through my enhanced senses once again. The relaxed mood I had been enjoying suddenly turned heavy with dread and concern. I took a deep breath and made a firm decision in my heart. Even though I was no longer technically human, I absolutely couldn't allow myself to lose my fundamental humanity and moral principles. At worst, my vampire identity would be exposed to the authorities, and I would have to flee to remote mountain forests. I could hide there safely until I became powerful enough to return to human civilization as an invincible force. So I pulled out my phone and dialed the emergency number for our city's public security bureau. I reported urgently that crimson worms had successfully invaded our city, and many innocent people had already been parasitized by these dangerous organisms. The situation was extremely urgent and required immediate official response. Suddenly, the voice on the other end of the phone call changed from a woman's professional tone to a man's casual speaking pattern. My eyes widened with shock and horror as I realized what this transformation meant. I opened my mouth to speak, but found myself completely unable to form words. The man on the phone seemed completely unconcerned about being discovered in such an obvious way. He said cheerfully that since their secret was already exposed, they might as well play an entertaining game together. He thanked me sarcastically for my helpful phone call, then added that I shouldn't die too quickly because that would ruin all their fun. After the call ended abruptly, I clenched my teeth with rage and crushed the phone in my hand without even thinking about it. The Crimson Worms had already successfully invaded our city's public security bureau and taken control of key personnel. In the distance, a massive chemical plant suddenly exploded with tremendous force. The blast was so powerful that all the windows in our school building shattered instantly, sending glass fragments flying in every direction. Every student in the building let out terrified screams as chaos erupted throughout the campus. At that exact moment, every classmate who had been parasitized by Crimson Worms stood up from their seats with completely expressionless faces. They seemed to have received some kind of unified telepathic command from their parasite controllers. 6 writhing red tentacles that were each 3 meters long suddenly burst from their backs like grotesque wings. The students who had just recovered from their initial panic over the explosion stared with bulging eyes at this impossible transformation. A sharp tentacle lashed out faster than lightning and wrapped around Zhang's neck before he could even react to the danger. In the next second, a brilliant flash of silver light appeared and sliced the attacking tentacle cleanly in half. I had concentrated what little silver blood I possessed onto my fingertips and used it like a razor-sharp blade. I shouted for everyone to get behind me immediately for protection. As I spoke these words, I rushed into our classroom and severed the tentacle that was wrapped around Chen's throat. I quickly pulled her behind me to safety. I told Zhang to stay close to me at all times, while I picked up a metal chair with one hand to use as an improvised weapon. I swung it with tremendous force and knocked down a crimson worm that had been charging directly toward us. I stepped hard on the creature's head with my foot, crushing it completely flat against the floor. Then I lifted the chair above my head and began swinging it in wide arcs around my body. Wherever I moved through the chaotic classroom, infected students were knocked unconscious one after another by my relentless assault. Zhang stared at me with his mouth hanging open in complete amazement. He stammered that I must have secretly eaten some kind of forbidden supernatural fruit to gain such incredible physical abilities. Chen's eyes sparkled with admiration as she asked why she had never noticed how attractive and heroic I looked before this moment. I snapped at both of them to stop staring uselessly and help me rescue the other students instead. Some of our classmates had been knocked down by aggressive crimson worms, and we still didn't know if they were dead or alive in the aftermath of the attack. What made me even more frustrated was that Princess Akira, who was supposed to be a powerful vampire with supernatural abilities, was actually hanging in midair with a tentacle wrapped tightly around her neck. Her long legs, which even our school uniform couldn't completely hide, were kicking around randomly in desperate panic. At first, I had suspected that Princess Akira had transferred to our school specifically to deal with me as a threat, but after witnessing her completely pathetic performance during this crisis, all my previous suspicions evaporated instantly. With this level of combat effectiveness, even an ordinary human could easily overpower her in a real fight. Zhang used his chair to successfully block an incoming tentacle attack, but the chair was immediately snatched away by superior strength. I glanced back and frowned with concern when I saw his predicament. It was obvious that students from other classrooms had already been completely defeated by the Crimson Worm invasion. Infected students from throughout the school building were now swarming toward our location like a hungry horde. Our classroom had entrance doors at both the front and back, making it completely impossible to defend against attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. I made a quick tactical decision and shouted for everyone to prepare for an immediate retreat to the school rooftop. I threw my chair with perfect accuracy and blew apart the head of the crimson worm that was choking Princess Akira. Then, I scooped up the fallen princess in my arms and sprinted toward the exit as fast as possible. All the surviving students followed my lead and rushed together toward the stairwell. We fought our way through waves of infected students and finally burst through the door onto the teaching building's rooftop. I carefully set Princess Akira down on the ground and pushed her toward Chen for medical attention. I turned around and slammed the rooftop access door shut behind us. then leaned my full body weight against it to keep the crimson worms from following us up here. I absorbed as much sunlight as possible to recover my strength, while the other students collapsed to catch their breath. Their clothes were completely soaked with sweat from our desperate escape. After resting for a few precious moments, Zhang couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. He asked me directly what was happening and why there were so many crimson worms infesting our school. Another student said in panic that those were definitely the same parasites from the Shibuya incident 1 year ago. Chen said angrily that the situation was obvious to anyone with eyes. These were clearly crimson worms, but what did they actually want from us? I sighed heavily and shook my head with frustration. I admitted that I had no idea what their ultimate goals might be, but I was certain that our current location wasn't safe for much longer. Once the crimson worms took complete control of the entire school building, they would definitely launch a coordinated assault on our rooftop position. I couldn't possibly hold off hundreds of infected students by myself, no matter how strong I had become. I suggested that everyone should look around carefully and try to find anything we could use as makeshift weapons for the coming battle. Zhang immediately proposed that we should remove the barbed wire from the rooftop's perimeter and wrap it around our access door as additional security. It was currently 4:30 in the afternoon, which meant we had approximately 2.5 hours of daylight remaining before sunset. Princess Akira spoke up weakly from where she was sitting. She said that if we could somehow manage to hold our position until complete darkness fell, her guardian would definitely come to rescue all of us. By then, we would finally be saved from this nightmare scenario. I knew clearly that my illegal vampire identity had already been exposed in front of Princess Akira through my superhuman combat performance. When her powerful guardian eventually arrived to extract her from this dangerous situation, I would immediately find myself in mortal peril. I explained grimly that it would be far too late for any rescue attempt to succeed. By the time her guardian managed to reach our location, the crimson worms would have probably devoured every single one of us completely. If the crimson worms decided to concentrate all their available forces for one massive coordinated attack, I was confident that I could jump off the building and escape to safety. However, all the rest of them would almost certainly die horrible deaths in the process. I told Zhang and several other male students to come help me hold the door, while I went to try crafting some kind of weapon from available materials. Princess Akira suddenly spoke up with excitement in her voice. She announced that she actually had a weapon we could use for our defense. As she spoke these words, she revealed an elegant silver bracelet that had been hidden on her wrist. In the next moment, a bright red handgun materialized out of thin air in her palm. All my classmates Akira with expressions mates stared at Princess of complete surprise and amazement. Although there had been online discussions about spatial storage equipment in various forms, this was the first time any of them had witnessed real supernatural storage technology in person. I asked if she had any other weapons available besides that single handgun. The pistol only contained a few dozen bullets at most, and I seriously doubted we could eliminate even one crimson worm before running out of ammunition completely. Princess Akira remained silent for a long moment, then reluctantly produced a short knife from her storage bracelet. She explained somewhat embarrassedly that this was a silver knife designed specifically for harming vampires. It wasn't particularly sharp for normal combat, but it had an extremely strong restraining effect against vampire physiology. She warned me to be very careful when handling the silver blade. I took the knife from her extended hand with a knowing smirk on my face. Princess Akira immediately looked down at the ground, with her face turning bright red from embarrassment. She knew that I must have guessed something important about her true purpose for being here. I thanked her politely for the weapon and said it had arrived at exactly the right time. Then, under the stunned gazes of everyone present, I squeezed the short knife in my hand until it compressed into a small silver ball. I opened my mouth wide and took a large bite of the metal sphere, then smiled with satisfaction. I declared that it was perfect timing because I had been feeling quite hungry. Princess Akira looked up at me as if she was witnessing something completely impossible. She thought to herself that a vampire who wasn't afraid of sunlight and could actually consume silver metal was absolutely ridiculous. This completely defied everything she knew about vampire biology and limitations. After I absorbed all the silver from the knife, my five senses became fully enhanced to their maximum potential. I took a deep breath and activated a special ability that turned my entire body completely black. When Zhang witnessed this dramatic transformation, he couldn't help but exclaim in shock and ask what was wrong with me. I smiled reassuringly and explained that I was perfectly fine. In fact, I was better than I had ever been in my entire existence. In everyone else's perception, I appeared to be completely black from head to toe. This was mainly because I was using silver blood to enhance my body's ability to absorb light energy, causing my physical form to reflect absolutely no light wavelengths whatsoever. As everyone knows from basic physics, when an object reflects no light at all, it becomes what scientists call a perfect black body. That was my current state of being. While in this enhanced form, my stamina and energy recovered extremely quickly because there was more than enough solar energy available for consumption. I announced that I would go downstairs and deal with all the crimson worms that had invaded our school. I instructed everyone to stay exactly where they were and avoid moving around unnecessarily. Then I turned around confidently and left the rooftop to begin my counterattack against the parasite invasion. After I went downstairs to confront the crimson worm infestation, Chen asked the remaining students with genuine curiosity what they thought my supernatural ability actually was. Princess Akira couldn't help but respond thoughtfully that I probably hadn't consumed any forbidden fruit at all. She explained that anyone who became a supernatural being through eating forbidden fruit would automatically reach at least the intermediate power level. Dealing with the crimson worms currently infesting our school building wouldn't present such obvious difficulties for someone at that strength tier. Because shortly after forbidden fruits first appeared in our world, supernatural beings had held a massive international conference to establish standardized power rankings. From lowest to highest, the official classifications were larva, worker, breeze, robin, viper, hawk, wolf, tiger, dragon, and divine. Even the weakest larva level possessed enough raw strength to easily overpower multiple ordinary humans in direct combat. Zhang looked at Princess Akira with intense curiosity and asked what level she estimated my current power to be. Princess Akira considered the question seriously for several moments before offering her educated guess. She believed I was probably somewhere in the upper larva range, or possibly lower worker level, based on my demonstrated abilities. Zhang then asked if she thought I could possibly be a vampire like herself. Everyone present burst into laughter when they heard this ridiculous suggestion. They pointed out that it was completely impossible since I obviously wasn't afraid of direct sunlight and had even eaten silver metal with apparent enjoyment. Princess Akira wanted to argue against their logic, but she couldn't find any reasonable explanation to support her vampire theory. Not being afraid of sunlight could potentially be explained by possessing a daywalker talent similar to her own. However, she herself didn't have any special ability that granted immunity to silver poisoning. Besides, I had also demonstrated that mysterious power to turn my entire body perfectly black, which definitely wasn't any vampire ability she had ever heard of. No matter how she analyzed the situation, I simply couldn't be a vampire according to everything she understood about their species. Princess Akira began to wonder if her guardian and the other investigators had made some kind of serious mistake in their background research. She decided she would need to have a very thorough conversation with them later to ensure they wouldn't wrongfully accuse an innocent person. Meanwhile, downstairs in the school building, I walked confidently along the 6th floor corridor with my fingers moving in fluid motions like I was playing an invisible piano. 3 crimson worms were instantly sliced into multiple pieces by nearly invisible silver threads. Currently, at least 40% of the blood flowing through my circulatory system had been successfully converted into silver blood. With this abundant supply of enhanced blood available, I could release extremely sharp silver threads that possessed both incredible cutting power and remarkable flexibility. This special metallic substance, created by mixing my blood with dissolved silver, could slice through solid steel as easily as cutting through soft butter. A crimson worm that had been parasitizing one of our math teachers spotted me systematically slaughtering its fellow parasites. Fear flickered clearly in its inhuman eyes as it realized the magnitude of threat I represented. The infected teacher opened his mouth and shouted a warning to alert every other crimson worm in the building. Dozens of parasitized students immediately swarmed out from their hiding places in various classrooms. When they saw me standing calmly in the hallway, they roared with rage and charged forward in a coordinated attack formation. With a single focused thought, a silver thread shot out from my extended fingertip and swept horizontally across the charging group. All the attacking crimson worms were cut perfectly in half by the impossibly sharp thread. Their severed bodies fell to the floor in 2 neat rows, while I looked toward the end of the corridor. The math teacher who had shouted the initial warning had already fled without a trace during the confusion. As I expected, crimson worms that parasitized adult hosts were significantly more cunning and strategic than those controlling student bodies. At that moment, the distant sound of heavy artillery fire echoed from somewhere across the city. Obviously, our municipal government forces hadn't been completely overwhelmed by the parasite invasion after all. They had finally organized a proper counterattack using military resources. This was definitely excellent news for our situation, because reinforcements meant I no longer needed to worry about protecting the students on the rooftop while fighting. Now, I could focus entirely on aggressive offense and systematically eliminate every single crimson worm throughout the entire school building. Just as I was preparing to continue downstairs to the 5th floor, a painful groan came from somewhere nearby. I immediately stopped moving and listened carefully for the source. Could there actually be uninfected students still alive and hiding somewhere on this floor? I turned around and walked cautiously into the nearest classroom to investigate the sound. I discovered a survivor cowering in the corner behind an overturned desk. Meanwhile, at Sakura City General Hospital, located across town, countless crimson worms were frantically devouring medical staff throughout the facility. Hospital Director Yamamoto hid inside his locked office, not daring to breathe loudly enough to attract attention. Compared to crimson worms that parasitized mentally stable individuals, those that had infected psychiatric patients were obviously far more violent and completely unafraid of physical pain. The armed security guards stationed throughout the hospital had only managed to fire a single warning shot before being instantly overwhelmed and killed by the enhanced parasites. Director Yamamoto could only hope desperately that official rescue teams would arrive soon to save any remaining survivors. Suddenly, his office door was violently kicked open with tremendous force, and a man wearing a hospital patient gown walked inside with a disturbing smile. The patient called out cheerfully while searching the office thoroughly. He announced that he was looking for the director and wondered aloud where such an important person might be hiding. He tapped experimentally on various cabinet doors, while muttering to himself about being disappointed that the director wasn't readily available. He explained that he had wanted to share an absolutely incredible secret with the medical staff. After a few more moments of searching, he seemed genuinely saddened and concluded that the director must have evacuated already. Director Yamamoto's eyes widened with recognition and terror as he realized who was speaking. The patient was Takeshi Mori, easily the most dangerous individual confined within their psychiatric facility. He suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder, and while his primary personality remained somewhat functional, all his alternate personalities were absolutely terrifying. These included serial killers, body part collectors, cannibals, and other disturbed personas that defied rational explanation. This man had been permanently restrained in maximum security straitjackets 24 hours per day for his own safety and that of everyone around him. Director Yamamoto couldn't begin to imagine how Takeshi had managed to break free from those restraints and avoid being attacked by the crimson worms that had overrun the hospital. Whether Takeshi was still human or had been taken over by parasites, the director had absolutely no desire to interact with such a dangerous individual under any circumstances. Unfortunately, Things didn't proceed according to his desperate hopes. Just as he thought Takeshi had finally left the office area, the cabinet door was suddenly yanked open with violent force. Takeshi looked down at the trembling director with a wide, unsettling grin. He announced triumphantly that he had found his target and expressed his happiness at this successful discovery. Director Yamamoto asked in a shaking voice what Takeshi wanted from him. He warned the patient not to do anything reckless or harmful. Takeshi laughed maniacally and asked what would happen if he decided to ignore that advice. He pointed out that no one could lock him up anymore now that the hospital's security had completely collapsed. Suddenly, his facial expression shifted dramatically from manic excitement to timid uncertainty. He asked the director in a childlike voice if he was sick and requested a medical examination. Takeshi placed his hand on the desk and looked at Director Yamamoto with innocent, hopeful eyes. The director didn't dare move a single muscle in response to this request. Takeshi didn't seem particularly concerned by the lack of response. He continued speaking in an excited tone about how amazing the current world situation had become. He explained that a parasite had tried to possess his body, and initially, he had been terrified by the experience. But the parasite had made a critical error by choosing to replace his primary personality first. After it successfully took over the main consciousness, all of his alternate personalities had somehow parasitized the crimson worm instead. Now, they had completely suppressed the parasite's original consciousness and gained control of its enhanced physical abilities. Director Yamamoto asked in horror if this meant the real Takeshi had already been replaced by the crimson worm's consciousness, but his alternate personalities had somehow infected the parasite and dominated it completely. Takeshi nodded enthusiastically and praised the director for understanding the situation so quickly with just a brief explanation. He asked if the director thought he should be classified as human or as a crimson worm at this point. Director Yamamoto looked at the terrifying scene unfolding before him as his pupils dilated with shock. Takeshi's body began sprouting writhing tentacles from various locations, while his facial features twisted into something inhuman. Despite this monstrous transformation, Takeshi insisted cheerfully that he was definitely still human. Director Yamamoto stared at the horrific sight and was literally scared to death by what he witnessed. His heart simply stopped beating from pure terror. Takeshi looked down at the director's motionless body and curled his lips with disappointment. He complained about how boring the interaction had become, then suddenly thought of something that might provide better entertainment. He decided there was still before sunrise plenty of time remaining, so why not pay a visit to that interesting young man he had heard about? Back at Sakura High School, I had successfully carried an injured student with a broken leg back to the rooftop and carefully set him down among the other survivors. I called out for all the male students to come help with rescue operations. I explained that I had eliminated every crimson worm on the 6th floor, and there were many wounded classmates who desperately needed our assistance. Dana-chen immediately volunteered to join the rescue mission as well. She argued that they only needed 2 people to remain on the rooftop to care for the injured students. Princess Akira also stepped forward and declared that she wanted to contribute to the effort. She felt like she should be doing something productive to help, instead of just hiding uselessly. I didn't refuse their offer because there were quite a few injured students scattered throughout the building, and additional helpers would definitely make the rescue process more efficient. However, when everyone went down to the 6th floor and entered one of the classrooms, they couldn't help but run immediately to the hallway and vomit violently. The scene inside the classroom was absolutely horrific, resembling something from the worst nightmares imaginable. Princess Akira looked at Chen and the other students with genuine concern and asked if they were feeling all right after witnessing such carnage. I glanced at Princess Akira with some surprise. I had expected that they would react with disgust to the gruesome aftermath, but I hadn't anticipated that Princess Akira would remain completely unaffected by the gore. She explained matter-of-factly that vampires don't even possess the physical ability to vomit, so the sight didn't bother her particularly. That's when I realized that I also felt no physical discomfort whatsoever when looking at the massacre, and it was entirely because I had become a vampire myself. At that moment, a crimson worm charged up the stairwell from the 5th floor below us. I immediately flicked my finger and released a silver thread that cut the attacking parasite cleanly in half. Princess Akira witnessed my silver thread attack, and her eyes widened with shock. She thought to herself that this was the exact same major talent that her father had awakened when he reached 150 years of age. Why would such an advanced ability appear in someone so young? She stared at me with complete disbelief and confusion. After Zhang and the others recovered from their nausea, I decided not to remain on the 6th floor any longer. I was prepared to continue downstairs and systematically eliminate more crimson worms while rescuing additional survivors. Princess Akira called out that she wanted to accompany me on this dangerous mission. I looked at Princess Akira as if I was observing a foolish goose wrapped in gold. I had been planning to refuse her request, but then she made an offer I couldn't possibly ignore. She promised that if I allowed her to come with me, she would provide 20 kilograms of pure silver as payment for my assistance. I immediately agreed to her proposal with enthusiasm. Silver was extremely expensive in the current market, and 20 kilograms would supply my needs for an extended period of time. The two of us proceeded down to the 5th floor together, where I began flicking my fingers to shoot out silver threads and eliminate crimson worms one after another. Princess Akira didn't remain idle during this process either. She drew her red handgun and carefully aimed at one of the parasites. After a single gunshot, the targeted crimson worm's body exploded into pieces on impact. I was somewhat surprised by the weapon's impressive destructive power. Princess Akira looked at the fallen parasite and talked excitedly to herself about actually hitting her target successfully. She had never been particularly skilled at marksmanship, so this represented a significant personal achievement. She then pulled the trigger repeatedly at additional crimson worms, and one by one they were blown apart by her explosive ammunition. Princess Akira's handgun contained a total of 15 rounds. After eliminating 15 crimson worms in rapid succession, she began fumbling to reload her weapon with fresh ammunition. Seeing this opportunity, the remaining parasites immediately swarmed out from behind their classroom shelter to attack us. Before they could get close enough to cause harm, I controlled my silver threads and killed every single one of them efficiently. After confirming that all crimson worms on the 5th floor had been eliminated, we continued down to the 4th floor. We maintained the same coordinated attack pattern and soon cleared that level as well. I asked Princess Akira if she had sufficient ammunition remaining for continued operations. She nodded confidently and explained that she had prepared 100,000 rounds of ammunition in her storage bracelet. Ever since being attacked by ordinary humans, she had made special preparations by acquiring handguns and massive quantities of ammunition. There was definitely more than enough firepower available for our current mission. With their effective tactical cooperation, they managed to eliminate all crimson worms on the 3rd floor in just 1 minute. Then they continued their systematic advance down to the 2nd floor level. During our descent, Princess Akira walked behind me while casting complicated glances in my direction. She finally asked directly if I was also a vampire like herself. I continued walking ahead and replied calmly that I had been diagnosed with a terminal blood disease. I would have died within months if I hadn't undergone vampire transformation to save my life. I explained that I had heard through various sources that because of my illegal transformation, she had not only been attacked by criminal gangs, but also faced social ostracism from other students at her previous school. I apologized sincerely for the problems I had inadvertently caused in her life. I continued by saying that when I had called the authorities to report the Crimson Worm invasion, I was already mentally prepared for the consequences of exposure. After we finished resolving this current disaster, I planned to disappear from human society entirely. I wouldn't return to civilization until I had become powerful enough to protect myself from any threat. Princess Akira listened to my explanation with complicated emotions. She murmured softly that she finally understood the full situation. When they reached the 2nd floor, Princess Akira set aside her personal concerns and began eliminating crimson worms with renewed focus and determination. At that crucial moment, the infected teacher who had escaped earlier suddenly rushed out of a classroom and leaped down from the corridor directly onto the school courtyard below. I immediately jumped from the second floor to the courtyard to intercept him before he could escape entirely. Before I could take action, a gunshot rang out from above. The crimson worm inhabiting the teacher's body exploded instantly from Princess Akira's precise shot. Princess Akira stood on the second floor balcony holding her smoking weapon, and she flashed a cunning smile when I turned around to look up at her. Her long golden hair fluttered dramatically in the evening breeze as she struck a victorious pose. I reconsidered my previous assessment of her abilities. She wasn't a foolish golden goose after all, but rather a beautiful and clever golden goose with hidden talents. Suddenly, fear appeared clearly in Princess Akira's eyes, and she opened her mouth as if trying to shout a warning. When her voice finally reached my ears, a black shadow had already flashed past with incredible speed. I reacted as quickly as possible and immediately dodged to one side, but I still had one arm severed cleanly by the shadow's attack. A heavy metal signboard crashed into the wall behind me with tremendous force. I covered my bleeding wound with my remaining hand and spun around immediately, only to see a woman in an elegant business suit crouching on top of our school's perimeter wall. I hadn't noticed when or how she had arrived in that position. After 999 days of basking in sunlight and growing stronger with each passing moment, Kazuki had transformed from a dying student into an unstoppable force that defied every vampire tradition. His journey from weakness to overwhelming power showed that sometimes breaking all the rules leads to the greatest victories. The solar-powered vampire who devoured silver and commanded deadly threads had become something entirely new in the supernatural world. Whether facing ancient clan politics or parasitic invasions, his unique abilities prove that evolution never stops for those brave enough to embrace the impossible.